Hey everybody, welcome to a new series on an introduction to debating. Throughout this video series, I'm going to cover a lot of the basics of debating, talking you through how it works, what different speaker roles are, and basically just give you a toolbox to draw from if you want to enter the world of debating and begin your journey in what I think is the finest of intellectual sports that there is. So let's get started. So what I'm going to cover in this video today is essentially like what debating is for starters. And specifically, I'm going to talk about what's called the World School Style format, which is the most common form of debating that I'm aware of on the world scene. And it's certainly the most common down here in New Zealand. I'm going to cover just briefly what each speaker role entails, give you an overview of this, but there will be a second video following this where I'll dip a little bit deeper into what each speaker does within a debate. I'm going to cover some of the unique aspects of World School Style because there are a few quirks to it. And then I'm going to talk you through maybe a little bit about what you could be doing if you want to start out in debating. And then there's a little bit of a challenge that you can do at the end of the video just to test your initial debating skills. So let's get into it. So, what is debating? Okay, so basically, the way that I consider debating is that it's organized arguing. And what I mean by organized arguing is that it's a civil form of argumentation. When we have arguments in our real lives, with our parents and stuff like that, we might sort of devolve into personal attacks and say some things that we might think are mean or we regret later on. Debating is not like that. Debating is all about logical persuasion. What you're trying to attack in a debate is not your opponent, it's your opponent's argument and their ideas. And while there is an element of what we might consider speech making in debating, certainly you get up and you deliver speeches. Debating is different because it requires engagement. And this is a word that you'll hear a lot in debating circles. Engagement basically means how much do you actually engage with what the other team is saying to you. It would be very easy to get up and deliver a range of really well prepared and well written speeches, but debating's a little bit more on the fly, responding to the things that are being said to you by the opposing team. The phrase that I love is that it's an intellectual team sport, and this is a phrase that one of my mentors in debating, Mrs. Laura Heath, an excellent debating coach who's coached debaters who've gone on to be the best in the world at a secondary school's level. She used to call it an intellectual team sport, and that's an excellent way to think about what debating is just generally. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about world school style. So this is a style of debating that's common here in New Zealand. In New Zealand schools debating, this is the type of style that the national competition adopts. And you also see it on the world stage a lot. There are other styles. For example, British parliamentary style might be more common to you if you are in the United Kingdom, for example. But world school style is the style I'll cover in this video. So how does it work? Well, essentially you have two teams and they argue over what's called a motion. In some circles, this might be called a moot. Basically, it means the same thing. You have team proposition, who are sometimes called the affirming team. They are for the motion, so they are arguing in favor of it. Team opposition, or negating as they are sometimes called, is arguing against the motion. And each team will have three speakers, and each one of those speakers has a distinct role to do within the debate. So there's specific nuances depending on whether you're speaker one, two, or three. So, how would a debate actually unfold? Well, let me kind of talk you through it with this sort of illustrated diagram of how it works. So, essentially, the two teams would be assigned sides of the house. Okay, it's referred to as the house because it's essentially adopting a kind of like political or parliamentary style. Where if you've ever watched Parliament, especially down here in New Zealand, you'll hear politicians refer to their side of the house. So in debating, we refer to different sides of the house as well. So there's the proposition side of the house and the opposition side. So they both teams are given a side of the house and then they're given the motion. So for the sake of this illustration, let's assume the motion is this house believes in compulsory school uniforms. Obviously, team proposition is for this, team opposition is against. So when the debate proper begins, the first set of speeches, and this is the bulk of the debate itself, are called substantive speeches. And these are long speeches, typically around 7 to 8 minutes. They can be shorter if you are a junior level debater. They can be longer if you are a senior level debater. And how it would unfold is essentially as follows. So the person running the debate is called the chairperson. They're kind of like the referee of sorts. They're the person whose role it is to just make sure that the debate unfolds the way that it is meant to. They are meant to maintain order within the debate, and essentially just make sure that things run smoothly. There'll also be another person involved in the debate, a timekeeper, and their job is essentially, as you might assume, to time the debates. And they'll often give signals to the debaters throughout their speech. Usually, when there's a minute remaining in their speech, they might ding a bell or wave their hand. And then again, when their speech time is up, to just signal to the speaker that it's time to sit down and wrap up their speech. So the chairperson will get up, they'll call forward the first speaker of the debate, which would be proposition speaker 1. They'll deliver their speech, sit down. Chairperson then calls up opposition speaker 1 to respond to this, and then it carries on as you might assume. Proposition speaker 2 gets up, opposition speaker 2, proposition speaker 3, and then opposition speaker 3. And these are the substantive portions of the debate. In terms of time, this would be, about 80% of the debate would be these substantive speeches. Now, there are still 2 speeches that are yet to come. These are not substantive speeches. These are called the leader's replies. And a weird thing happens here. The speaking order reverses. So the first leader's reply we hear is from the opposition, and then the closing speech in the debate will be the proposition's leader's reply. At this point, the debate has finished, and what will likely happen is that the chairperson will commend both teams on a really good debate. They'll ask the teams to stand and cross the floor and shake hands, kind of like at the end of a sports fixture where you'll shake hands with the other team. And the adjudicator, who I have not mentioned yet, but the adjudicator is the judge. Sometimes there will be a panel of adjudicators, and they will basically deliberate on the result. So they may leave the room to go and talk about it, or they may stay in the room and everybody else will leave. And it will take them some time to kind of go through their notes, think about who they think has won the debate, deliberate essentially, much like a jury would in a court case. Then they will return. They will give the result, usually first and foremost, and then they'll talk through the result of the debate in what's called an OA, an oral adjudication, and they'll provide their reasoning for why they think the debate went the way that it did. And that's essentially how a debate would unfold. You can certainly watch debates online via YouTube. The New Zealand Schools Debating channel is a really good place to have a look at some example debates, and you'll see that it essentially unfolds in the way that I've illustrated here. Okay, so let's just dip into a little bit of what each speaker does now and talk through speaker roles. So the first speaker's role is essentially set up. So what they have to do is they have to outline the team's case. The case is essentially what the team has decided that they want to argue within the debate. It's the first speaker's job to get up and outline that case. And what they will do is they'll offer 2 main points within this broader case. Now, a case typically is made up of 3 points, what we call substantives in debating. And you would think logically that if there are 3 main points and there are 3 speakers in a team, that each speaker will deliver one of these points, but that's not actually the case. The first 2 main points are delivered by the first speaker, and they're essentially, as I've said already, setting up the debate and kind of outlining the main thrust of material from the team. Now, second speaker will get up, and because they've heard previous speeches from the other team, they would have heard the first speech from the team that they're facing, they will offer what's called rebuttal. Now, rebuttal is essentially counter-argument. So they would have been listening, second speaker that is, would have been listening to what the other team have had to say, and they will be considering all of their counter-arguments, and they'll get up and they'll deliver about 50-50 rebuttal to substantive material. So the first half of their speech will be rebutting all of the things that they've heard the other team say, basically saying why they think they're wrong. And then the second half of their speech will be the third main point that the team is going to bring to the table as part of their case. This is often called the split point. It's called the split point because it's the point that's split between first and second speaker. Okay, now third speaker has kind of perhaps the most unique role because their job is just to rebut, rebut, rebut. Okay, their job is essentially pure rebuttal. At third speaker, there will be no new material brought into the debate. They're essentially just dealing with what's already come up in the debate, offering their rebuttal, offering ideas for how they could strengthen their own team's case. And they may use what's called points of clash to do this, and that's something that I'll talk about in a separate video. Now, the reply speech, as I've already mentioned, is a much shorter speech. So if the main substantive speeches are 8 minutes, the reply speech will often be about 4 minutes, about half the length of time. And the reply speech is always delivered by either the first or the second speaker. It would not be delivered by the third speaker, because if you were third speaker opposition, you would literally finish your speech and then you would have to go straight into your leader's reply. So it's just not the done thing. This allows the first or the second speaker the time that they need during the third speeches to kind of consider how the debate's gone and to come up with their leader's reply. Now, the leader's reply is essentially a summary of how the debate has unfolded from the perspective of whichever team speaker it is. And what they try to offer is what we call biased adjudication. So essentially, what the leader is trying to do in their speech is tell the adjudicator why they should give their team the win. So they're trying to do their job for them and offer all those reasonings. So that's a real basic overview of each team and each speaker's role. There will be a separate video that I'll do where I'll dip a little bit deeper into what each speaker does, but that gives you a good broad overview at least. Okay, so there are some unique aspects and quirks of world school style debating. Okay, the first is that it's often a limited preparation form of debating. Now, there are essentially two forms of debating. There's prepared debating and there's limited preparation. Prepared debating means that you would have been given the motion potentially weeks in advance of the actual debate. And that means that you have the luxury of time. You can go away, you can research the topic, you can kind of think really carefully about all the arguments you want to bring forward as part of your case. And then you can really narrow in on writing and crafting those speeches that you deliver, especially at first and second with the substantives. Limited preparation is different. Limited preparation, and this is the common form that we do down here in New Zealand, you are only given about 30 minutes. So approximately 30 minutes before the debate is due to take place, that's when you'll be given your side and the motion itself, and then you'll basically go into a room without devices, and you'll have to sit down with your team and kind of come up with your team's case within that 30-minute window. 30 seconds would be interesting. So it is way more challenging. It's a little bit more of an adrenaline rush, but it's also a really exciting form of debating because a lot can happen within that limited preparation window. So as I've already mentioned, devices are never used. The only time you would see a device within a debate would be during the actual debate itself, when the speakers may use them as a method of keeping time for their own speeches. But certainly you wouldn't see somebody on their smartphone ChatGPTing stuff in the middle of a debate or in the preparation room. It's just simply a no-go. Okay, so the third bullet point down is what we call points of information. So a point of information is a really interesting feature of world school style debating. How it basically works is during a speech, a point of information may be offered by the non-speaking team. And so what they would essentially do is stand up and they would say point of information. And the speaker, the person whose main speech it is, has the option to either reject the point of information, at which point the person who stood up will sit down, or accept it. And if they accept the point of information, this means that the other team essentially has about 15 seconds to ask a question to try and challenge the speaker on a point that they may be making within their speech or that their team may have made already. And how it essentially works is that during these main speeches, you'll often see a speaker accept either one or two points of information. Very infrequently, they'll accept more because you don't really want to disrupt your speech by accepting a whole lot of questions from the other team. But it can be a point gathering role. So, a point of information. So, if you give a really good point of information and the speaker you've offered it to kind of stumbles, then obviously that can help your team gain some points. If you accept a point of information and you respond to it really well, that can give your team the advantage. So, it's a really exciting and dynamic part of debating as well. The only other things to mention are that there are different motion styles, which I'll cover again in a future video. And different motions call for different approaches. I won't spend too much time really talking about this now. It's something to consider the nuances of in a separate video, but it's just something to be aware of. If you're watching debates, there are different motion styles that require different care and attention. The last bullet point is kind of a bit of a myth buster when it comes to debating. So you may think that debating is all around like who can give the best speech and who sounds really good and who sounds really convincing and who uses humor and gestures and all of those classic sort of speech making characteristics that we're used to seeing, good speakers deploy. And while that does matter, and that's what we call style in debating, style is only one facet of a debate. And ultimately, the team that's going to win a debate every single time is going to be the most convincing team. That is the team whose argumentation and substance is the strongest. So while you may see a team who are just exceptional speakers, if their content is kind of thin or if their argumentation doesn't really hold true, and the other team are able to challenge this, even though they maybe don't sound as convincing when they're speaking, it doesn't matter. The team whose content and argumentation is the strongest will always win. Okay, so say you want to start out in debating. What are some things that you could do besides obviously like watching this video and kind of working out how it all works? Okay, the first thing that I would suggest is maybe to like watch some debates. Ideally, you'd be able to watch these live. Perhaps if your school runs debating, you could join the debating club, which I'll mention a little bit later, and go and watch some debates to sort of see how they work out. Alternatively, you can go online and you can watch debates on platforms like YouTube. The only thing that I would kind of say about this is the kinds of debates that you'll probably watch on YouTube will be like really sophisticated ones. They may be debates from the New Zealand Schools Debating Nationals Championship, which you can watch online, or even from the World Schools Championship. And these are the best of the best. So it might be a little bit intimidating for you if you're just starting out and you may think like, wow, I could never do what those guys are doing. But I guess the thing you need to consider is that those speakers all started out in the same way that you did as well. And they would have gone through a process of kind of trying to work out how a debate works, build their confidence until they reach the point that they are at. So don't feel like intimidated or put off by it. It can just be a really good way to just see how a debate works and kind of follow the outline that I illustrated in that previous slide. The best thing you can do at a school's level is just like join your debating club. Hopefully, your school has one or has like a dedicated debating society, perhaps. Universities certainly have this as well if you're thinking about joining at a university level. And this is where you're going to learn the most. You're going to learn from the coaches that you have access to, and you're also going to learn from like other more experienced debaters. And it should just be a really fun way to kind of test it out and see if it's for you. Another really good thing to do is to engage with what I call debate media. And what I mean by debate media is probably like news and current event style programming. So, for example, in New Zealand, we have a radio network called RNZ, which is the national broadcaster, and they have two shows on, one in the morning called Morning Report, and another one in the afternoon called Checkpoint. And essentially, what these are like current event style broadcasts. And what you hear here is essentially a version of debating. You'll often have like a really good media interviewer who will be interviewing like politicians or people from the community on challenging issues. They're often asking like really tough and hard questions. And it's a really good way to kind of tune your brain to like how to think through issues and just learn a lot about what different issues there are out in the world as well. So this can be a really good place to equip yourself with the kinds of stuff that you might have to end up debating one day yourself. Other cool things you could do would just be to like debate topics and ideas like with a friend. So maybe you have a friend who's kind of like low key keen on debating as well. And you might, instead of like discussing, I don't know, Minecraft or something at break time, you might like pick a topic that's been in the news and kind of like debate on it. Like, for example, should boy racers' cars be crushed if they, get caught by the police too many times? It would be a really good kind of thing to discuss and come up with all the different arguments that you can. Another thing you can do on your own is find what's called a motion bank or a moot bank, and you could test yourself on a variety of like different debating topics. So essentially, what these are is just like a collection of like a whole bunch of different motions. There's a really good Auckland Schools debating motion bank that I've used in the past, and it basically collects all these different debating topics from years gone by, and you can kind of read through them and see the kinds of topics that have been debated historically and sort of think about what you might do if you were debating them. So that can be a really good way as well. Cool. So, like on that note of motions, why don't we just do a little quick challenge to close this video out? So, what I'm going to do in a moment is I'm going to give you a motion, and I want you to assume that you are for this motion, so you are arguing in favor of it. And I want you to, when I've given you the motion, pause this video and maybe set a stopwatch for like 3 minutes. And I want you to come up with as many arguments for this motion as you can within that window of time. Once you've done that, you can press play on the video and you can kind of compare the different points that you might have come up with against the kinds of points that I have. So here is the motion. It's the one that you saw earlier. This house believes in compulsory school uniforms. So why don't you pause the video now, set that stopwatch for 3 minutes, and see how many ideas you can come up with. Okay, I'm assuming you've unpaused the video now and you are back with me. So if you came up with some arguments kind of along these lines, for example, that school uniforms can be cheaper than buying like a whole variety of clothes that you would have to wear every day if you didn't have a school uniform, or that school uniforms help kind of give a school pride and a sense of tradition, or a really good one, which is that they basically reduce bullying because everybody is wearing the same clothes, so nobody's getting picked on for like not having the right pair of shoes. If you came up with any arguments along these lines, congratulations. You have what it takes to be a debater. You can obviously think your way through a topic, come up with some solid ideas, and the next step would be for you to put them into practice by speaking them out loud in the context of a debate. So thank you so much for like spending this time to go through this video. I hope it's been helpful for you. I am going to follow this video up with a specific video on different speaker roles. So until then, ka kite. And if you want more content from me, obviously subscribe to my channel, The Lit Teacher, where there's debating content, but also content just more generally on English literature and things that might help you out with your exams at school. Awesome. Thanks, guys.